main review is going to be on Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, the new, this week's big release, I suppose it is, isn't it?
Yes.
Which I find very interesting because this is obviously a movie that has its base on an existing product, but is in itself an original story.
Yes.
It's not based on an original, because it's Dungeons and Dragons. You create your own.
You create your own
story. That's the
campaign.
whole
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons.
And I'm sure there's a lot of nods in there that are things that fans and players of the games will kind of get to pick up on, but
And
it
completely way over Morgan's head because
Yes.
I've never played Dungeons and Dragons.
It doesn't exclude but doesn't exclude those who have not played the game, because yes, I've never played, so I'm sure there are things in there that were really fun nods to people who've played, but also nothing that would exclude somebody who hasn't. So I liked that balance, and I feel like this is the type of movie that is set up to completely fail and not do well.
And you know what? It really is. It really is. It's obviously a known product, but the fact it's not a known story, the fact it's an original story off a known product, it doesn't speak to success.
Yeah.
But I think this movie deserves to be successful, because I think this movie is genuinely a really good action adventure movie, and something actually that feels a little bit different to all those others that we get in that genre, that either are based on stories we already know or based on characters we already know. This is entirely original. It's the closest thing, and I've seen other people say this as well, and I completely agree. I've seen people on Twitter say this. It's the closest thing we've had to the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie since the first Pirates of the Caribbean, because that was obviously based on something that was already there in the ride,
but no
that obviously
story
had
really there.
No story to it. It
and
had
also
to
something
create
that felt
its
like it
own
could
original
fail.
story.
Yeah,
something
that seemingly was like, oh my gosh, a movie about a theme park ride.
And this is a movie about a role-playing game.
Yeah.
Based in the world of a role-playing game that is entirely created by you playing it at that time. There's no set anything, really.
Yeah.
Is there, in Dungeons and Dragons? Maybe other people who are actually knowledgeable about Dungeons and Dragons will be able to tell me different, but as far as I'm aware, you get your piece of paper and you kind of just imagine everything.
Yes.
So it's the closest thing, I think, to Curse of the Black Pearl since that, in terms of the context of the movie.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful it's actually a really fun movie, a really well put together movie. I think I think things like this as well can also fall into that trap of being cut up to hell, and have plot elements that were seemingly important halfway through the movie be completely turned around and just be like, either not show up later on in the movie as callbacks when they feel like they should, or have things that seem to come out of nowhere. And everything fit together really well in this story.
Mm-hmm.
All the little kind of magical items and little characters you meet along the way come back in certain ways,
in interesting ways. It felt like elements of a game. Yeah. So, like, if you even understand the simple structure of the game, like some of the items that they use definitely feel like items that you would collect in a game to use for your quest. So it definitely feels like you're playing a game, like you're moving to the next phase of the game.
And look, there's nothing overly innovative about the story structure of it. It's a former ally takes over a city and we have to defeat them because they're now the villain. But are they really the true villain, or is there a bigger villain at play? It's a very typical fantasy kind of story.
Yeah.
But that's not to say it doesn't work. That's not to say that really what I think we're most interested in, what we're most kind of into about this movie, is our cast of characters, who I think are all really, really enjoyable to watch. We recently spoke about Michelle Rodriguez in Girl Fight on Morgan Has a
Yeah.
Queen. I think she's great in this, and I do genuinely think she's given a little bit more to do than what we're used to seeing her
Yeah,
in
she
a
gets to be
Fast and
comedic.
Furious
You know,
movie.
she does get to be her very tough girl stereotype, but she also gets to be comedic. She gets to be kind of like a mother figure as well. Her
Yeah.
dynamic within the team, I think, is really well
Well, she's
played,
the
and
muscle, essentially,
yes,
isn't she?
yes, and I think the team in general have great chemistry, so her role in that fits really well amongst kind of the others, and how she interacts with everybody, I think, works really well. Um, and yeah, even her comedic moments, I think, are really fun. So I do like that this movie does give her kind of typical action stuff that we are used to seeing her as, but also giving her a little bit more to do in terms of uh, things that she has to accomplish as this character, being kind of a surrogate mother, um,
Yeah.
and a comedic, but like very dry sense of humor.
Very
So
dry, as you
yeah,
would expect from Michelle
yeah,
Rodriguez in a
yeah,
comedic sense, to be honest with you. Chris Pine is our goofy character in this
yeah,
movie, who I do think is very good. I mean, let's call him another goofy Hollywood Chris, because they all seem to be a little bit goofy, don't they? The Hollywood
yeah,
Chris's, that they all
yeah.
seem to excel at doing this same kind of thing. Maybe they're all the same person. Maybe they're all just a little bit of a different clone of each other. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think Chris Pine is always and consistently the most underrated of the Chris's.
Yes, he's great.
And
He
it's
can do dramatic,
because
he can do comedic, he's funny, he's likable, he's charming, he's not,
he's not played
difficult
a
to look at.
direct superhero. That's why.
Yeah.
Because the other three are all the MCU heroes, aren't they?
Yes.
Chris Pine's just, you know, Wonder Woman's boyfriend. That's as close as he's come.
Yeah.
Yes, he's Captain Kirk for this
Yes,
generation, sure.
yes.
He is, but I think there's a lot to be said for the fact that he does those other things, and he's known for more than just one character.
Yeah.
Whereas really, what's Chris Pratt going to be remembered for? Not stupid Owen from Jurassic World. Remember for Star-Lord. Chris
Yeah.
Evans is always going to be Captain America.
Yeah.
And Chris Hemsworth's always going
He's
to be
gonna
Thor.
be Thor. Mhm.
But Chris Pine is Chris Pine because he does many different
Everything. Yeah, he
things.
does so much stuff. Yeah.
And he's in several of these kind of movies. He's in Wonder Woman, he's in the DC movies, he's in Star Trek, he's in now he's got Dungeons and Dragons that will hopefully, I think,
Continue. Yeah.
continue, because I think it deserves to. Whether it's even, I think this is an interesting thought as well, whether it continues with almost a completely different cast and a completely different story, because isn't that
Yeah,
what Dungeons and Dragons
why
is?
would you follow these same people again, and maybe we run into them on the way?
Yeah,
But it's a completely different campaign, a different journey to go on. So you're not
I think
following
that
kind
would
of your
be
same.
very interesting.
Yes. And I think this, we have had other version of a Dungeons and Dragons movie that came out in a time where
Oh,
it just
yes,
was
of
not
course.
so very cheaply made. Jeremy
Jeremy
Irons
Irons, wasn't it?
literally saying, well, I had to pay for my castle somehow. um, he bought a
Bad,
castle
bad
in like
CG in that movie.
yes,
Frighteningly terrible
yes.
CG.
Jeremy Irons, the person, was actually buying a castle, and so like it's like I had to pay for that somehow. Was basically kind of how he talks about this movie. Yeah, just very sloppily put together, that movie. I think Marlon Wayne's in it as well. Just
Marlon Wayans in that movie.
yes, he's like the
Oh,
sidekick kind of
dear.
character. So yeah, definitely not. So this had everything about it to kind of fail and maybe just be not well executed, but it was a lot of fun, and I think it's actually striking while the iron's hot, where people are actually who maybe don't play are really more familiar with it things like Stranger Things have made Dungeons and Dragons kind
Definitely.
of popular to the
Definitely.
mainstream. An actor like Joe Manganiello is like a super hot guy, really showing his nerddom, really promoting Dungeons and Dragons and having campaigns and talking about it and having a whole, merch. And, that's like his uh, whole side of his brand is talking about Dungeons and Dragons. I think he has a show where he actually has other celebrities on and like they do campaigns. And I think he did this whole like furniture show where he had these people build him this custom table, this long like table made out of like a big tree trunk, whatever, like so he could play his Dungeon and Dragon campaign. So a popular like actor who you would not think is a total nerd, nerding out over Dungeons and Dragons and bringing more popularity to it. So
I
I
wanna
think there
say Henry Cavill's similar. I wanna say Henry Cavill's a bit
Yeah,
of
I
a
think there's a few like big actors who you would not expect who are really kind of into this fantasy game and have brought it more to the mainstream and talk about it more in recent years. So that coupled with the popularity of Stranger Things really bringing that to light, I think.
yeah.
Um because I mean the monsters in Stranger Things are literally based on monsters from the game.
Yeah.
Have put that on people's radars, people who may not know anything about the game. So this, I think, was a perfect time for this movie to come out when it's more mainstream now to talk about Dungeons and Dragons and play it, and it's not this niche, weird thing that kids play in their basement. Uh,
I think I think I think this movie is perhaps going to be what the Warcraft movie wanted to
wanted to
be.
be, yes, and that movie was kind of a big failure and didn't work out as well with something that is more
I think
popular
people
and
liked that movie, but I think it wasn't it remained niche
no, and
from what I
but
can
I think there were
remember.
some from what I remember as well, there were just some execution issues, like characterizations weren't well
Okay.
depicted and things like that.
Okay.
Um, so yeah,
But
I
obviously you
definitely
don't
like
get that issue with
it. Could
Dungeons&
have
and
been,
Dragons because it's
yes, and it,
entirely created.
Dungeons and Dragons could have been a Warcraft situation. This kind of big idea of something that's popular, but just not being able to execute it. But this movie was funny. Um, it played into the fantasy world, feeling like it's from a certain time, but obviously not nailing down a specific time because
Yeah,
it's
it was
a
but
fantasy world.
as a story, because it's a structure you've seen so many times,
Yeah,
I just think you enjoy the story, you enjoy this kind of hero's story with it.
yeah,
The quest elements. You're always going to like that. It's always going to end the same way, but
yeah,
the journey is what is interesting, that the going to these strange places and mystical locations, finding these long forgotten magical items and having your team of kind
yeah.
of
Your crew,
lackluster people
yes,
who
kind of
find it within
embolden
themselves to
themselves and step up.
yeah,
And the part of part of these characters that you don't get if you're playing them as a game is the kind of character arcs and the character growth. Because
yeah,
you're not going to get that in a campaign game like this if you're playing at home. So you get the beats of the game, but then you go beyond that because since it's a movie, you actually get time to sit with these characters, get to know them, and see their growth and them learn um and become more than what they originally were. So I like that these characters are really fleshed out and kind of go somewhere and have some growth by the end of the
I
movie.
mean,
Um,
Chris Pine specifically does. He's our lead of the whole
yes.
thing, really. But like Simon the Sorcerer, he has a
Yes.
really nice
Arc.
arc.
Yeah.
I like him. And Sophia Lillis, I forget the character's name now. She's in there.
Yeah.
She's great in it. Everybody's great in this.
Yeah. The
Um,
team has great
Reg-
chemistry with each other.
Rege-Jean Page comes in as kind of your know-it-all wizard
Yeah, so he's not like an official
being.
part of the team, but he kind of comes in and has his own beat that he kind of comes into the campaign and helps
I
them
mean,
and
he is a
works with them. But
strikingly good-looking gentleman
yes,
as
so
well, isn't he?
I just don't think you're allowed to have him and Chris Pine on screen at the same time for too long, without people's heads exploding. I actually saw a piece of news that the two of them actually have like an internet's boyfriend chat where they send each other like memes about themselves.
I would like to think that's true.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yes.
I think that's nice.
Yeah.
I like the idea. I don't know why I like the idea of that.
No.
I just
So they're fully aware of how hot the
Oh, they
world
must
thinks they
be.
are.
They must be. I mean, I think Rege-Jean Page ever since it's Bridgerton,
Bridgerton.
isn't it?
Yes, I
Has
think
just
we're definitely gonna have to do a Morgan hasn't seen TV and talk about Bridgerton
he
at some
has
point.
just exploded in
Totally.
people's minds, really, hasn't he? It's just
Yeah.
like, who
Yes.
is this?
Yes.
And this movie, I think, will add to that because he is
Yeah.
incredibly kind of omnipotent in this movie, almost, isn't
Yeah.
he? He's ridiculously powerful, ridiculously kind of all-knowing. And then just kind of walks off when you don't need me anymore. You're
Yeah.
fine now. You're just like, whoa, can you not help? No, I'm gonna walk off
No,
now.
man.
And it feels like a real, feels like an old Greek myth. You know,
Yeah.
something like that happening.
Yes.
I think there's elements to that in it. There's so much folklore elements, obviously, to something like Dungeons and Dragons because it's a fantasy setting. It's full of monsters
And
that just
wizards and
wizards
and our
and
villain.
sorcery.
We have our con man villain in Hugh Grant.
Who seems to be good at playing con man villains, doesn't
Yes.
he?
Yes, I mean, he was
Even though
kind of
he is
our
Hugh Grant in
rom-com
this
guy,
movie.
and then has made the shift to villain, in his later years, and I think I think it
I
worked.
think it's because he's, for some reason, playing up the accent now. You know what I mean? Like in this
Yeah.
movie, he didn't sound like Hugh Grant, and Hugh Grant's voice to me has always been a little bit annoying. I've only been able to tolerate certain elements of Hugh Grant. But he sounds like some sort of. I mean, I'll be honest with you, he sounds like a certain ex-Prime Minister of Britain.
Ooh.
In terms of just the stuttering kind of nature of the way he's speaking in this
Well, I
movie.
mean, in
It's
this movie,
ridiculous.
he's supposed to be this type of politician, kind of
He is.
mayor, essentially, of this
He is.
town.
I understand that.
And
But
I think I like him. I expected him to be in it more, and the fact that he wasn't, but it plays into the plot of him kind of just being a prop for the ultimate plan of our ultimate villain, this
yes,
red
which is
wizard.
I like.
Yeah,
I like that
yeah,
he's not our actual main villain. I like that it's more of a wizardy thing.
yeah,
Because I mean, it reminds me of the red wizards in this movie. To be fair, remind me exactly like the red priests in Game of Thrones lore.
yeah, yeah.
You know, let's go to a shy. What are the red priests doing? Here they come with all their unknown magic and
Yeah.
bringing people back to life and all this kind of stuff. It's very similar,
Yeah.
really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Bringing back the dead, are they dead? But are the red priests, or are they the others, the White
Yes.
Walkers? It's a little bit of a combination of the two
Yes.
of them in this movie,
Yes.
but they do dress exactly like red priests of Game of Thrones lore. To be
Yeah, pretty
honest with you,
much.
Song of Ice and Fire, which I was quite into that. Really, I was into the amount of sorcery in this
Yeah,
movie.
and
I think
magic and
good sword and sorcery movies are so hard to come by these days. You know, good sword and sorcery movies we consider as those cheeseball things from the 80s,
yeah,
or earlier ones even. You know, your Greek tales, your Jason and the Argonauts,
yeah.
things
With
like that.
Yeah.
Clash of the Titans. So genuinely good, like not campy sword and
No.
sorcery movies that this is, because it's exactly that genre of fantasy. It's not science fantasy, is it? It's sword and sorcery fantasy.
Yeah.
You don't get a lot of movies certainly close to being this big of that genre these days. And thank God you've got one here that is this big with this much backing behind it. That's actually a really good movie as well.
Yes,
Bring
yes.
back the sword and sorcery movies. They're so enjoyable.
I think
because
there's fear there because
escapism.
fantasy is very much a niche thing. So I think there's some fear there to really delve
But
into
is
that
it though?
and
But
hope
is
for it
it?
to be successful because I think it doesn't have the best track record. I think fantasy films tend to end up being, if you're not like people just kind of writing it off as a Lord of the Rings wannabe type thing. And
Lord of the Rings had to start somewhere in
fair.
in the movie world. I
But I think
mean,
it's just like those types of movies don't really find an audience right at the start. It kind of takes time for people to get into them. So right off the bat, they don't really maybe do that well, and so I think there's some hesitance there.
which is
But
why I
this,
think it's brilliant that this had it's obvious it's based on a pre-existing thing, but be an original story.
and then also kind of have your comedy feel very modern. Um,
Yeah.
so there's a fun balance of kind of like this old medieval feel, but these characters feel very relatable and modern, with the
Not
kind
that
of
it's making
jokes
like
and
jokes about memes or things like
oh
that,
no,
but it's
no, no. It just yeah. I think their feel just feels very natural to today and not like very specific of the time, just kind of how they talk and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, how they act, I suppose.
Yeah.
No, I had so much fun with this. I really enjoyed it far
Yes, I had
more than
fun.
I thought I would.
Same.
And I'm so thankful for that because it's made me realize that we genuinely do need more modern good sword and sorcery movies
Yes.
because we don't really have any
We need more
major
fantasy movies, I
notable
think, for
ones.
sure. And also things that are based on IPs, so you kind of have that backbone to it, but you really are doing your own thing with it. You really are bringing your own touch and flair and story to it, making it interesting, not just um being completely fan servicey or really just being lazy so it feels like a cash grab. Uh, you know, crafting a story behind something that already has a proven track record for fans, I think is definitely the way to go. Like this could have been so bad and so lazily made and really feel like it's just trying to go for the cash grab. But they crafted a really original, fun story with great characters that you really invest in, that really have an arc and growth, and you really want to see where they're going to go. And yeah, great action, great comedy, just a lot of fun.
I hope so much this movie does well. My
Yeah,
screen that I went to was quite busy, to be fair.
mine as
It
well. Mine
was
as
in the
well.
middle of the day, so this was good.
Mine
This is a
was
good
way more
sign.
than when I went to see Shazam. I think there were maybe like 3 other people in
Yeah,
there.
people. Shazam's not doing well.
No.
Shazam's not doing well at all.
Mm-mm.
Um, I would actually, I mean, not to compare two pretty different movies, but I'd sooner go and see Dungeons and Dragons again. I'd
Yeah.
definitely sooner go and see that again. I hope it does well, and I hope to see more of this style from
Yes.
these creatives. It's John Francis Daly and isn't it? He's involved. Was he one of the directors?
I think so. I don't remember.
I'm sure he is. He's
And also
obviously known as a pretty notable geek, isn't he? That was a good
yes.
joke. Everybody
um
understood that joke. Nobody understood that joke. Hopefully, people understood that joke.
and also great representation of fat dragons. Appreciate that.
Oh yeah, that dragon was very fat. That was the fattest dragon you've ever seen in your entire life.
yes.
Was it in a dungeon? Yeah, no, that wasn't
You
really a
could call that.
dungeon, was it?
No,
I'll be
no,
honest with
no.
you. There was both dungeons and
And
dragons in this.
dragons.
I do not believe there was a dragon in a
In a
dungeon.
dungeon. Well, it doesn't say it's not dungeons in dragons in dungeons. It's
No, it's
dungeons
not.
and dragons.
No, and both were present,
Yes.
somewhat. Would you
Yes.
consider that prison a dungeon, or it's more of a prison? It's not really a dungeon.
I mean,
It's
is
more
it
of a
is it in the
very
lower levels? That would be a dungeon if it's kind of in the...
No, that prison, that big tall prison thing at the
Oh,
beginning. That's not a dungeon. That's an official state-funded prison.
state funded.
I
I
don't
mean,
know
yeah.
who funds it, but it's not a dungeon. Dungeons are little grimy things.
Yeah.
Anyway, good movie.
Yes, very
Good
enjoyable.
movie. More of this, please, is what I will
Yay.
say. More of Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves. Go and see it. You will enjoy it. It's a
Yes, it's a lot
very,
of
very
fun. A lot of
enjoyable
fun.
movie.
Yeah.
Pure fantasy escapism that we just need sometimes, don't we? We don't want to think about misery and horrible things in the real world. We
Yeah.
like to think about nothing sometimes and go off into fantasy fairyland
Yes. We...
and do it with that. Well,